My name is Jill Glassbrook, and I am the Executive Director and co-founder of Future Leaders Incubator. We're really happy to have you here today. I am going to be talking through with you how to understand the decision-making process for education policy, identifying who needs to be contacted when advocating for change in your school, and how the figures of authority are held accountable. Prior to being the executive director here at FLY, I was a chief academic officer at a network of schools, and before that I was a principal, before that an assistant principal and dean. Before that I coached teachers and served in several of the roles that we're going to talk about today. And of course before that I was a teacher. So as we take a look at a ladder that kind of shows all of these roles and their impact, I do want to assure you that I do have experience in each one, and so I'll be speaking through the lens of what it feels like to be able to make change at a school, and hopefully walking through who has the most power in making that change. And my goal is to help you see that you actually are the ones that have the most power. So let's take a look here. When you're thinking about power structures at your school, the first thing that you want to think about is the problem. And once you've considered the problem, you want to think about what's the first thing that has to happen to make change. Then who or what is the complaint actually about? How do I talk through the issue with the right people? And again, we're going to talk a little bit more about who the right people might be at your school. And the last one is, who do I actually complain to? Once you know who the complaint's about, you need to know who to complain to. I think it's really important that you think about these 4 questions as you think about the social justice issue that you'll be tackling, mostly because we tend to go to the extremes when there's a complaint at hand and when we're unhappy with what's happening at our school, when really it's the small progressive steps that we can take towards enacting change that make the biggest difference and have the longest lasting impact at our schools. So let's take a look at some of the school structures. This is meant to be a ladder. You'll see that it's kind of shaped a little bit like a triangle. I've designed this to hopefully show that at the base of our school structures are the people that have the most power. Teachers don't always think that. Students don't always think that. It's important to know that we don't always think that we have the power that we do. And then it's also important to act on that and make change because of it. Of the stakeholders in school policy, who actually holds the power? It's important to think about that. But as you're taking a look at this ladder, you'll also notice that as you move up the ladder, the roles that are there are people with more perceived power. A lot of times that's because they might be elected in, they might get a better paycheck, it might be because they sound fancier or wear nicer clothing, it might be because they're more likely to be white males as you go up this ladder, even though in education we know that the majority of teachers are actually white females. All of that being said, the people at the base are actually the ones that have to enact change to make it happen. So no matter what an authorizer might say, if a teacher doesn't end up doing it, it doesn't happen in a school. If a teacher doesn't do it, it won't impact students. So it's really important to know that this base here is actually where most of the power lies. But who's at the base of the ladder and why? We just talked about that. It's you. You are the one that makes the very most impact at a school, and using that power to be able to make social justice changes in your school is really important. And then the other question here is something that you should be reflecting on, which is, why doesn't it feel like we have the power? And I'm going to lead this into the same discussion that we have with teachers, which is that teachers often feel like they can't actually make the change that they want to. But a lot of times I believe that's because we don't know the structures that actually can enlist and make that change. So we're going to talk about some of those structures as we go through this chart. First, we're going to take a look at our school-based stakeholders. These are the people that are within the school. That's your principal. Your principal generally has a dean or several deans and assistant principals that report to them. The people that report to those deans and assistant principals are coaches and mentors. The people that report to them are grade team leaders or content team leaders. The people that report to them are teachers. And then the people that report to them are generally students. So a lot of times we don't know this. A lot of times we go straight to a principal with a complaint. But if you can picture what that looks like in practice at a school, is that if a principal hears a complaint and wants to address it, then they have to go to the AP. Then the AP goes to a coach or a mentor teacher. Then that individual goes to a grader content team leader. Then that individual goes to a teacher. This is like a game of telephone. By the time the complaint actually gets to the teacher, if it even does, the message is so misconstrued, it often ends up leading to something like, sure, yeah, I fixed that, I'm not worried about it. And then change doesn't happen. Whereas, just like with telephone, if you actually go directly to the source, you're more likely to make change. If the source doesn't make change, that's when you elevate it. If that doesn't make change, that's when you elevate it. The other thing to consider here is, what if it does make change, but it's not enough? Remember, we want to set small goals. If you want to change the thing at the end, you have to make small change along the way. So going up that ladder is really important. And if your issue is addressed, then it's time to bring up another issue that'll get you closer and closer to your goals. As much as possible, you want to make changes on a school-based level, so you want to work with stakeholders at the school. Again, working up these rungs with the people that have the most power to make change first. That starts here and goes up. If you don't know who these people are, generally students don't, enlist some teachers that you trust. Teachers can make change. Find some allies that are teachers at your school. They'll help you identify who your grade and content leaders are. They'll help you identify who their coaches are and their mentors are. They'll help you identify which assistant principals or deans are in charge of what at your school and how much authority they have to make change. Next, we're taking a look here at those out-of-school stakeholders. That's this group here. That's generally who the principal reports to, who that person reports to, who that person reports to, and who that person reports to. These folks generally take a long time to make change. They might want to make change. They have a lot of incentives to make change at school sites, but a lot of times what we notice when we go straight here is that will result in some sort of letter writing from a principal to respond to the complaint that went all the way up here and doesn't necessarily relate to making change. Whenever possible, we want to keep complaints at the school-based level, but if you really want to elevate something, taking it to out-of-school stakeholders could be helpful. So when you make a complaint, what happens to it? Where does it go? Well, individual parent complaints usually land in this level, where teachers and grade team leads are impacted. Parent or teacher committees, these are larger groups of parents, usually land all the way up here. So if you have an issue that you can take care of with just one individual parent complaint, you want to do it down here. If you need it to go up the chain, you want to come up here. Department of Education complaints, those usually come in this area where it hits both in and out of school stakeholders. These also is similar for 311 complaints, so those usually hit the principal directly. Next are local government. This is when you go to an elected official. This might be a committee, this might be your council member, or it might be somebody else that's in an elected position. That'll go right up here, and then you can see, even though these individuals have a lot of clout in the school system, they don't necessarily have immediate impact in your schools. And then finally, state or federal government complaints go all the way up here to whoever the authorizing body is for the school. A lot of times that's the Department of Education as well. So if you go all the way here, it kind of has to come all the way back down here before it can be addressed. That can take a lot of time to go through each of these rungs. If you don't need to go all the way up to the top, don't. A lot of times we think that if we go all the way to the top, we're more likely to make change, but enacting that change is actually more likely to happen if you start with the people that have power. Not formal power, but actual power in the school. Offices in federal government, those people would impact all of these, and then your local education agencies, they basically cover everything here, so use them sparingly. Next, we have just an overview. Take a look at this as we go into the next level of things. As we talked about going up the levels of impact, you want to look around the room. So you want to start at the school level, move into parent groups, move over to your LEAs, move over to your local government, and then up to state and federal level. When complaints happen, you want to ask all of the questions that we've already talked about and then move through each of these. Document at each stage. If you want to elevate something and you haven't started here and you go straight over here, that's going to be a problem. Nobody's going to accept the complaint until you've documented it at the school level, with parent groups, at your LEA, with local government, and then at state or federal levels. You want to make sure every time you're moving all the way through. And that's it. Thank you.